And moving into decimals. So decimals are another form of fractions. The following list compares decimals with their equivalents in fraction format. So 0.8 or 8/10 is obviously 8 over 10. 5.06 or 5 and 6/100 is 5 and then 6 over 100. So all the place values match up to the decimal space, the decimal places. So then reading decimals, 16.4 is 16 and 4/10, 234 and 5/100 because the 5 is in the hundredths place, 6 and 346 thousandths because you use the last, you use the last place value in the number as the name. So 346 thousandths. In this case, it would be 34 and 5,078 10,000ths. Then, cruising on, they give us a little overview. Just like I said, there is tenths right after the decimal point, tenths, and then hundredths, and then thousandths, and then 10,000ths. And that's pretty much the furthest you're going to go in decimals on the HSPT. Okay, so then let us look at our first example. What does the digit 4 represent in the number that they give you? 563.047 or 47 thousandths. So then what is the 4? Think of money. That 4, is it in the tenths place or is it in the hundredths place? It is in the hundredths place because it's 4 pennies. So we know that this is hundredths. Always think of money when it comes to decimals. So then they gave us the answer there. They pointed at it with arrows. We know where it's at. So then here is our next part of comparing decimals to fractions. So they ask you to change 3/8 to a decimal. All you're going to do is divide. When you divide 3 over 8, if this is what you're dividing, the numerator always goes in the box. Numerator in the box, denominator outside the box. We are already set up to have a decimal here. So we get to put our extra place value in. 8 goes into 30. It goes in 3 times for 24. And then we get 6. And then we would do 7 because we would get 56. And then we would keep dividing and we would get 4. We get to put another place value and we get 5. And it'll terminate there because 5 times 8 is 40. So then it's pretty much what they just did right here. I just did it a little bit more messy here and kind of a little more mentally. But that's it. So that would be it. If you're doing a problem, and we're going to do our sample ones, but if you're doing a problem and you already have the first decimals going and you already see the answer matches one of the answers like perfectly, bail out, pick that answer and move on because your time is very valuable taking this test. So it's worth it to risk that you're probably right and save those seconds to use on another problem. So then here, they ask us to change 0.68 to a fraction. So we need to look at the place value we're given. We're given a 6 and an 8, so tenths, hundredths. So it's really 68 over 100. Pretty straightforward. And then we need to figure out what is a GCF we could say that we have between these two. We could probably divide by 2 if we really couldn't think of anything better. So we can divide by 2. If we divide by 2, I know I get 34 over 50. But then I think I can divide again, which is totally fine. I think I could divide by 2. I can get 25. And if I divide this by 2, I get 17. So this is my final answer because it's already simplified. If you already saw that you would divide by 4, fantastic. If you didn't see that you would divide by 4, then do it by 2. There's no shame in that. Do it by 2, simplify it once. Does it look totally simplified? It doesn't to me because this ends in 4, this ends in 0. I can divide by 2 one more time. I'm going to divide by 2 one more time. I get 17 over 25, totally simplified. That's our final answer. Cool. Then they show us this little tidbit about repeating decimals are indicated by a line over the repeating digits. So in this case, it's just the 5 that repeats. So it's only a 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, just like they have in front right here. In this case, it is 3.46 that repeats. So the 4-6 repeats. So that is what has the line over it. If there was an extra number that repeated, then it would also be under the line. So that is just a little refresher on that. Then we're going to look at the next part here. Uh-oh, my copy didn't come out so great, but that's okay. We can handle this. Okay. So we're going to look at number 1. Number 1 says, which decimal is the equivalent of 5/8? That means I'm going to do a little bit of division. So 5 goes inside the box, 8 goes outside. How many groups are 8 can go into 5? None. So I need to put a decimal and borrow. So then I end up with 8 into 50. 8 can go into 50 6 times, right? Which gets us 48. So I already know this is not an answer. Then I subtract, I'm left with 2. I can then go one more time. I get a 2. And this is my only option that has a 2. So that's the one I have to pick. I don't need to finish this out. There's no reason to keep going. I don't need the actual answer because it's already given to me here. So I bail out. Then my next one, which fraction is the equivalent of 0.78? I'm sorry. So then I'm going to do my place value. This is tenths. This is hundredths. So I have 78 hundredths. Again, I'm going to use my even number rule. They're both even numbers, so I can divide by 2. This divided by 2 is 50. I know that for sure. And then I end up with 70 divided by 2, which is 35. And then 8 divided by 2, which is 4. Put them together, it's 39. Or even better, before I even did that part, if I look over here when I already did my simplifying, there's no way 800 is the denominator. There's no way 100 is the denominator because it's not going to stay there. So then I'm only left with these two options. And we already knew it was 50, so I would already know I would go with B. I wouldn't even have to go to this point over here. I just know that I can divide it one more time and get 50, so I would pick that as my answer and bail out. Then this one asks me, which decimal is the closest equivalent to 2/3? Well, let's double check. 3 outside the box, 2 inside the box. I'm going to put my decimal down and I'm going to put my 0 and then I can divide. 3 goes into 20, 6 times for 18. And I get a leftover 2. So I know it's going to go 0.66, right? So I'm going to get 0.66. I'm going to get 20, again, 18. I'm going to keep going over and over. So this one, no, because it's not a whole number. This one, no, and this one, no. It's going to keep repeating. So I'm going to pick that one because I can already tell I'm going to keep getting 20, which means I'm going to keep getting 18. So it's going to be 0.6 with a bar on top. If this had a bar on top, it would totally be A, but it doesn't. So I'm going to go with D. And we're right. So we were correct. So then let us look at our next section of decimals. We're being asked to round off decimals, round off the product of 3.46 and 2.03 to the nearest tenth. Multiply first, then look at the hundredth place, blah, blah, blah. We know the drill. So we can multiply first and just do our really simple multiplication. Multiply it all through. They did the multiplication already. So I'm just going to do that. And then we do this part. And then they add them up together. And they get 8 and 3 and 2 and the 10. So we get all this. And then when you do multiplication, you always count up the place values that you used in your multiplication. So we have 2 place values here and 2 place values here with the decimal. So I know it's 4 total place values to get to here. Then they ask us to round to the what? Where'd they say? Oh, to the nearest 10th. Here it is. So we're going to round to the nearest 10th. I look at my 10th place. There's nothing there. So I'm going to look to the 100th place. Oh, it's 2. So it's less than 5. So I know that this is approximately 7. And that's it. Or 7.0 if you really want to put it like they did. It's up to you. So then, moving on, we're going to look at our next example here that we get to actually practice on. Ignore the answers there. They won't be there on your test. So we're going to find the sum. So 25.06 plus 67.43. And 6 plus 3 is 9. 4 plus 0 is 4. 7 plus 5 is 12. And 6 plus 3 is 9. So 92.49. So is it going to be closer by rounding to the nearest 10th, right? So I'm looking at my 10th. I'm looking at the number in front of it. Am I going to round that 4 to a 5 or keep it at a 4? I'm going to round it up to a 5 because the 9 is higher than 5. So my 4 rounds up to 5 and I am done. For the next one, round off the product. Ooh, multiplying now. Of 8.53, and I want to go to the nearest 100th just so I keep that in mind, times 0.9. So all I'm going to do is multiply straight through. 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 5, 45, plus 2, 47. 9 times 8 is 72, plus 4 is 76. And then I'm going to end up with 1, 2, 3 place values. So I end up with 7.677. They asked me to round to the nearest 100th. My 100th here is 7, and the one in front of it is a 7. So I'm going to make this a 0.68. And there it is. And that is where I rounded off to. So that is that one. Then moving on to our next part of operations with decimals. They're asking us to add 3 decimals up together. So again, very straightforward. When you're adding or subtracting, you always line up the decimal points, just like they did here. So you want to make sure you line them up. It doesn't matter where your overhang is, as long as the decimal points are all lined up in order so that you can always do the math with the place value you have. And this is doing a little bit of division. When you divide decimals, you are fully allowed to get rid of the decimals to make your division a little bit easier. But it's actually because you're dividing the place values when you stack it as a ratio anyway. But that's the reason why it works. All you need to worry about is you can eliminate the decimals by moving the decimal points the same places in both numbers. So I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places in the numerator and 2 places in the denominator, which is actually what they did right here. Let's look at number 1. They ask us to add these 3 values together. They ask us to add 84.29 plus 234.752 and 45. Nice. Since it's addition, you can do it in any order you like. I'm going to add the 45 to the 84.29 and make my life easy. You could add the 45 to the 234 if you prefer. It's whatever floats your boat, whatever you feel like. So I'm going to do this. So if I add these 2 together, I get the 29 left over, 0.29. I get 9, and I get 12. So I get 129.29, and I'm going to do my math over here. So I get 129.29, and then to that, I am going to add 234.752. Ooh, the 2 is an overhang. Okay. So I already know from looking at this, just from looking at this, I have an overhanging 2 here, right? This is my answer. I already know this is going to end in a 2. I don't even have to do the problem. It's going to end in a 2. Am I right? Yes, I'm right. The answer is right there. I'm right. So you don't have to waste time doing the whole math problem. This is, again, strategic math. I know that when I add that with this, I get an overhang of 0 plus 2, which gets me 2. I'm done. That's my answer. So then our next one here, Jamie packed 12 scales. If each scale weighed 15.73 ounces, what was the total weight of all the scales? Total weight of all of them, there's 12 groups that are each 15.73. So we know we're going to multiply. So 15.73 times 12. We're going to multiply it. I already know there's 2 place values in my problem, so there's going to be 2 place values in my answer. So for the decimal point, so then I'm going to do 2 times 3, which gets me 6, 2 times 7, which gets me 14, 2 times 5 is 10, plus the 1, which gets me the 100, and then 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. Then I'm going to add my 1573 on the top because I'm multiplying by 1. So I'm just dropping it here. And then I'm going to do just a wee bit of math. 6 plus 0 is 6. Does that tell me anything? Yes, it tells me this is not the answer. And it also tells me this is not the answer. So it's between those two for my answer. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 1 is 8. 5 plus 3 is 8. And 1. 188. How many place values do I have? I have 2. It's this one. Actually, I could have already picked my answer when I saw this. When I saw that 7, 6, I should have already just picked this one and moved on. I didn't have to keep going. Then for 3, they ask us to multiply 4.58 by 0.7 and round off to the nearest tenth. 4.58 times 0.7. So we're going to multiply. 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 5 is 35. Plus 5 gets us 40. 7 times 4 is 28. Plus 4 is 32. How many decimal places? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 3.206. We have to round to the nearest hundredth. So we end up with tenths, hundredths. Hundredths, we look to the place in front. It's 6. So that means it's going to round up to 1. 3.21. And we are done with it. And that's it. That one, I mean, like, yeah, no. Yeah, you couldn't have seen that until the very end, until you got the 0 and the 6, and then you would have seen if you rounded up. So that one you did kind of have to go all the way. So for number 4, we are dividing 2. Whoops. Let me get rid of this. 2. We're going to divide 2. Whoops. Let me use my pen. We're going to divide 2.0592, and we are going to divide this by 0.72. I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places. I'm going to move it 2 places here, so I end up with my decimal point here. I'm going to do a little bit of division. How many groups of 72 are in 205? 2. I end up with 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 7 is 14. I end up with 144. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup math here. 5 minus 4 is 1. And then I'm going to borrow, and I end up with 61. Then I'm going to drop down my 9. So approximately how many groups go into 609? If 2 went into 205, how many do I think is going to go into here? I think it's 8. So 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 7 is 56, plus 1 is 57. 9 minus 6 is 3. And my 1, I'm going to end up borrowing. I'm going to 11 minus 7, which is 4. And then that's it. So I end up with 43. Then I'm going to drop down my 2. So I end up with 432. Approximately how many are going to go into this? Judgment call is about how many groups of 72 do we think is going to go into 432? I honestly think it is 6 because 6 times 2 is 12, which will get us that nice thing. And I know 6 times 7 is 42, plus 1 is 43. So it works. Fantastic. Here's where you need to be careful. Yes, 2.86 is the answer right here for B. However, we don't want that. We want it rounded to the nearest tenth, which means we need to look at this and see what we would bump that to. And that's why the answer is A. So once you get the answer, especially when we know it's like a rounding section, double check what you're supposed to round it to and don't just jump to picking the answer because they will always put the exact answer there, even if they're asking you to round. Okie dokes. The next part is scientific notation. Scientific notation is writing numbers with only a ones place and then all the other parts of it are put into decimal notation with a 10 with either a positive or a negative exponent on it, considering if you're multiplying by 10 or dividing by 10 to get the expanded number. So in this case, they have 768. If you move the decimal point 2 places, you will get 7.68, which is what you want for scientific notation. It's times 100 to get it back to what it was. So you change your notation to be this. 7.68, because you moved your decimal point 2 places. The exponent on it is 2, because those 2 places is technically dividing by 100, which means to get back to what it was, you have to multiply 100. In this case here, they gave you the scientific notation, 5.04 times 10 to the fourth, which means they're asking you to multiply by 10 4 times, or move the decimal point 4 places, if you will. So then you're going to move the decimal point 4 places over, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you end up with 50,400, which is what they ended up over here because they multiplied by 10,000 technically. But for the sake of efficiency, you're moving the decimal point because you're multiplying. You're multiplying by powers of 10, so you can move the decimal point over. So then here, they ask you to change 2.35 times 10 to the negative 2 to its decimal equivalent. If it's negative, you're always going to the left. So you're going to move 2 places to the left, 1, 2. So you end up with 0.0235, which is what they got right here. Then for this one, if your exponent is ever negative, you know that your number actually goes in the denominator. So in this case, 10 to the negative 1 is 1/10, 10 to the negative 2 is 1/100th, and 10 to the negative 3 is 1/1000th, because you just take the number and put it in the denominator because it is a negative exponent, and that's where your negative exponents always are. And then for this one, they show you the conversion. Again, you just know you move the decimal point 2 places because you're dividing. So instead of multiplying and expanding it, you're dividing and making it smaller. So you would move 2 places. Then the next one, they are asking us here in our practice to change 4.05 times 10 to the third to a whole number. So we're going to end up multiplying it by 10 to the third, which means we're going to end up moving our decimal place value 3 times because we're multiplying by 1,000. So we're going to move our decimal point over 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I need to hold that place with a 0. So we end up with 4050 or 4050. Is that an option? Yes, it is. It's C. Then over here, they ask us to change 6,941 to scientific notation. The understood decimals at the end. So I'm going to move my decimal point 1, 2, 3. Technically, I'm ending up dividing by 1,000. So we end up with 6.941. Also, first and foremost, just looking at these answers, this is wrong. It's not in notation. That's scientific notation. This is wrong too. It's not in scientific notation. It should always be a single digit in the ones place and then decimals after it. So it's between these two, and we already know it moved 3 places. So it's D. That's it. Then our last part, this is actually the last part. The last part is about percents, fractions, decimals, and percentages. So we're looking at, for the last section, this is the actual last section here, we're looking at percents. So fractions, decimals, and percents are all different methods of indicating part of a whole unit. So they're all fractional parts. changing fractions and whole numbers to percents. So if you're going to change 4/9 into a percent, you're going to end up dividing. You're going to divide it anyway and get a decimal, and then you're going to change that to a percentage. So 9 would go outside the box, 4 would go inside the box because the divisor goes outside the box and the dividend goes inside. So numerator in the box, denominator outside the box. And then we get a decimal, which is the whole point of why we're doing this, to get a decimal, right? And then 9 goes into 40 4 times, which gets us 36. 40 minus 36 is 4. And then we get a 0 for our next place value. 9 goes into 40 4 times. We know we're going to keep getting a repeating decimal because it's just going to keep going, right? It's going to be 4 and 4 and 4 and 4 and 4. So we know it's going to be 0.444. But they tell us to round it or change it to a 2-place percent. So I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places because I'm going to make it a percentage. So I'm going to multiply by 100. And then I am not going to round it up because it's a 4, not a 5 or higher. So we end up with 44%, which is what they actually gave us here anyways, the answer. And that was it. Short and sweet. Do some division, get the decimal, change your decimal to a percentage by dividing by 100, and then that's it. Nothing too stressful there. And we're going to do, and then they show you the division here, but we don't worry about that. It's all good. We know how to do some division. So here, same thing with number 1. They ask you to change 6/7 to a 2-place decimal. Fantastic. We can handle that. So 6 goes in the box, 7 outside the box, decimal point, so we can get an extra place value and get 60. So then 7 goes into 60 how many times? 8, right? We get 56. So 60 minus 56 is 4. I get to put another 0 because we get to move over place value. 7 into 40 is 5, which is 35, which gets us a leftover 5. And then 7 into 50 is 7. How many places do I need for my decimal? I only need 2, which means I only need 3 to find out if I round up or stay where I'm at. So I have 0.857. That tells me I'm going to round that 5. I'm going to get 0.86. My answer is A. I don't need to keep going. I don't need to know what the final answer is. I just need to get what the answer is that they're asking me for. Then here they ask us to change 3/11 to a percent. Choose the best answer. Okay, so choose the best answer kind of tells me we're rounding because it's not going to work out evenly. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And then secondly, this is not a percent. So C is gone. C is not an option. So then 11 goes outside the box. 3 goes inside our box. We're going to put our decimal point. We're going to borrow a place value so we can divide. 11 goes into 30 twice for 22. And we'll do a little bit of math and we get 8. I get to borrow another 0 because I'm moving over a place value. I get to multiply by 7. I get 77. I know I'm going to subtract and get 3. And then this is going to be 2 again. So I know it's 0.272. Even if I rounded up, I would still say at 27. So it's 27%. Decimal point only moves 2 places to multiply by 100. So we really end up with 27.2, which again stays at 22%. Sorry, 27%. Sorry. So even if I change it to a percent first, 1, 2, 27.2%, it's not going to round beyond 27%. So I will keep it at 27%, which is why D is our answer. Then our next one is changing our percents into a fraction. This is pretty straightforward and pretty easy. We know that this is out of 100, right? Just like a test score. So 45 out of 100. And then you got to look to see, is there a GCF to reduce by? Again, if you don't think of it, look at your ending numbers. 45 ends in 5, 100 ends in 0. They can both divide by 5. 45 divided by 5 is 9. 100 divided by 5 is 20. That is your final answer, 9 over 20. And that is actually what they got too. So that's it. Nothing too involved there, just division, that's it. So then for this one, our practice, they ask us to change 68% to a fraction and reduce to lowest terms. Okie dokes. We know it's 68 out of 100, right? So that's all good. 68 and 100 are both even numbers. Even if you can't find a GCF, you know it divides by 2, right? So we can divide by 2, which tells me this is wrong and this is wrong. So we're already there. Like we're already halfway done with this problem. If I divide by 2, I get 50. And then if I divide by 2, I get 34. And that's not this. So this one's wrong. It has to be this one. Even if I don't continue to reduce it, I know that 4 over 50 is not equal to this. So I bail out and I pick A and I'm done. If I really wanted to go for the gusto, I could still divide it and get 17 over 25. I know that's the right answer here because I can divide that by 2 and divide that by 2 again, which is fine. But again, you do not have to do that because nobody is going to see this. This doesn't count for anything other than it helped you solve the problem. It's finding the percent of a number. Again, don't let this worry you or freak you out. This is pretty straightforward and pretty easy. So if you're going to do this, they ask you to find 7% of 430. You always want to change your percent into a decimal, and then of always means multiply. So that keyword's always there. So we have 430, and yes, they did the math here, but I'm just going to show you. And then we're multiplying it by 0.07 because we move the decimal point 2 places because we're dividing by 100 because we're changing our percent to a decimal. And then I would run through my numbers. 7 times 0 is 0, 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28. So I end up with this. How many decimal places are in my problem? There are 2. So I end up with 30.1. So 30.1. Did they tell me to round off? Yes, they told me to round off to the nearest whole number. So that's why they get approximately 30 as our final answer here. Then let's look at the next one. If there were 300 people at dinner and nearly 39% of them ordered fish, approximately how many ordered fish? Change it to a decimal, 0.39 times 300. Again, you can do this however you like. Some people like doing the flip where you flip it and you do 0.39 and then the 3 and then you bring down the 2 zeros. You can totally do it that method too. Whatever works for you. 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 3 is 9. And we get 11. And then we have 2 decimal places in our problem. So 1, 2. So 117 people. But that's not there. So then what do we do? It's not there. What do we do? It's not there. And are we wrong? No. This is when you have to go back and just double check one thing. If there were 300 people, approximately how many people ordered the fish? Approximately tells us we're rounding it up. So we got 117. Our answer is C. It's 120. Don't freak out once you get this answer and you don't see it. Don't freak out and just either redo the whole thing again and waste time or randomly pick some other number. You want to double check. Did you read the directions correctly? Did you take everything into account? Oh, wait, I missed that. That just means I round or whatever it may be. And the answer will be there. So don't just do something willy-nilly because you freak out. And they put the answer there and that was all good. And this is actually the end of part 2. So the last part will be part 3. I will get up as soon as possible. And as always, if you have any questions and you are one of my students, you can always ask me in class. If you are not one of my students, you are welcome to put a comment on here if you do need help with anything. I do know that I'm kind of rushing through all this, but I also don't want to make the video super long because I know that everybody's doing a lot with distance learning right now, and I don't want to make these a whole production. So hopefully this is helpful, and it gives you a little bit of guidance for the HSPT, and I will see you in the next video. And good luck with your HSPT.